Hello, everybody. We're here with Superintendent Anthony Soto to talk about issues related to the public schools, of course. Thank you very much for being here, Superintendent. My first question is, there's the mayor, Joshua Garcia, and school committee members are all in agreement and that school receivership should come to an end within the next year. It sounded like the Education Secretary, Jeffrey Riley, was on board with the idea, but not being specific about it yet. In general terms, what do you think about that of returning to Holyoke, the Holyoke School Committee, the Holyoke voters, a say in public education here?
Yeah, what I would say is that, I have a really good relationship with the school committee, and when Dr. Zreich was here, he had a really good relationship with the school committee. They have been very involved. Unlike other receivership districts, we have been meeting regularly with the school committee on a monthly basis, and they each bring their own unique perspectives and what they bring to the table for Holyoke Public Schools, and I really appreciate the amount of diversity and the different opinions. But that you have a lot of good individuals that have great hearts that care deeply about the Holyoke Public School system. I know that part of what I try to do is we have a job to do and focus on our teachers, focus on our staff, focus on our students. And I know that a lot of the receivership conversation is really about the government structure and how it's being managed. I try really hard to keep our staff motivated on the task at hand, which is creating a good educational experience for our kids. It's a challenge navigating that sometimes, but what I think is that the commissioner has met with them and there is a petition that was written to the commissioner from the mayor on behalf of the mayor and the school committee, and that has triggered a process. And the next step in that process is for me to write a response. I think there's a 4-month period where we have to respond, and we'll be doing that, and I'm sure the community will be interested in what that response is going to be. I have a ton of confidence in the mayor. I think he's doing an amazing job, and the work that he's doing in creating structure and accountability and just the way he carries himself. I have a ton of confidence in his ability as a leader who happens to be the chair of the school committee. So I don't really have much opinions other than just really basing, what the next steps really are. So there's a petition that was filed. I'm from this community and I love this community. And I know a lot of people feel passionate and care deeply about the schools. So I just want to make sure that until this gets resolved, or until there's a transition, or whatever the next steps are, that we continue to focus on our students and our staff, because there are a lot of issues that still need to be addressed. I think that with receivership, over the last 8 or 9 years, there are a lot of accomplishments that we can name and we can recognize. There's been some great improvement in the graduation rate. We were in the low 60s before, and now we're in the upper 70s, which is great. It means more kids are graduating and less kids are dropping out. Our dropout rate is down. So those are big outcomes and wins for the city. Some of the stuff that people do not see is some of the operations and some of the investments that had been ignored for far too long, and we've put a focus on making sure that we're taking care of our facilities. We've spent over $20 million in investing in our learning environments, because those things matter. They matter to students, they matter to staff members. Really happy that we were able to get this new middle school voted on by our city council and supported by our school committee, and a lot of work went into that. We've been working on it since 2013, so it's very refreshing to see that that's moving forward.
Superintendent, just an aside, your 60-slide presentations at every school committee meeting are legendary. But getting back on track here, you have said that school should be a place of joy.
Yeah.
And so that students can learn, and the people who work there, it's a place of joy for everybody. Mm-hmm. That people love going there. And we are in a situation in this country where safety issues come up. How do you balance the joy of welcoming students? Sometimes metal detectors are put in place, and that's a safety issue. How do you balance that, though, for students to know you're safe, and to tell the teachers and everybody who works in the schools, we're doing everything we can so we can keep you safe?
Yeah, I feel like that's a two-part question. So the core belief that that schools should be a joyous place is, how that came up was, during my entry planning, I met with students, I met with staff members. I had, well over 60 focus group meetings to really get feedback from the community on what's working well and what needs to be improved. And that led to a strategic plan where we engaged a large number of stakeholders through listening sessions, through presentations, community meetings, focus groups, and came up with, what's our mission, what's our vision. And one of the things that we talked about was our core beliefs, and that was a core belief that a lot of people shared. We want our students to feel like they belong. We want them to enjoy going to school. And last year especially, I was feeling during the holidays, I was just feeling like, what more could we do to make that happen? And I had allocated about $500,000 and out to principals, and I said, look, this is one of our core beliefs. Please make that happen. So make fun, joyous experiences happen for our students and for our staff. And that was really fulfilling to see. I had a principal that I call her the Joy Queen because anytime she created an event for staff members or an event for students that, just a lot of smiles, she would always send me a picture and she would say, look at what this Joy money has done for our students. So we really do believe that. We want kids to want to come to school. It's important. And then in terms of the safety, there's only one thing that's more important than educating our students, and that's the safety of our students and staff members. So we don't have metal detectors at every single one of our schools, but we do have the ability to use portable means to be able to do searches if we need to. And unfortunately, you're right, there's things that are going on across the world, that have been going on. And unfortunately, things have happened in schools. So, we're lucky enough to have a crisis team. So we meet monthly as a crisis team. We partner. So every single school has a crisis team lead, and we partner with local law enforcement to review what our safety protocols are, to review what our lockdown drills are, to review any safety-related issues. Every time something like that happens across the world, that's a huge topic that the crisis team has. And they come together and they say, okay, based on what we learned from this, how are we going to adjust our procedures? As it relates to the metal detectors, we rarely use them. But in the event, I know we had to use them last year a few times and this year. We had some graffiti on the wall of threats being made, and we have to take those seriously, whether there's truth to them or not. We have to take them seriously, and while that might put some people on edge, some students, some staff, there's a lot of families that feel safe when they see that we have the ability to to do that. But we take safety very seriously. We got a district team. We have members at every school that are in charge of leading their portion of the crisis teams, and we partner with local law enforcement. We take safety seriously, and it's not ideal. I wish, we lived in a different world where we didn't have to worry about those things, but that's not the case. We do have to worry about those things. And most importantly, we just have to prepare our students, prepare our staff members to how do you react, and what are the expectations in a situation like that, where somebody wants to cause harm. And then where we do have situations where students are engaging in things that we don't want them to engage in, either graffiti or weapons, we also want to let our students know that we don't accept that level of behavior, and that there are consequences to those behaviors, and that this is a learning environment, and we want to do everything that we can to protect the learning environment so that students do feel safe and staff do feel safe, and it is a joyous place.
No doubt, and it's like you referenced, it's just the world we live in, things that happen. Most recently, as we all know, there was a massacre, and it is, I understand, joy and safety, and how to balance that out, and for students to know that they're absolutely welcome, that look for joy in the schools, in the learning experience, and the companionship that you can gain being in school. But also be real, the adults have to be pragmatic about safety issues. Thank you for explaining that. If we can talk about the absenteeism issue, do you think some of it has to do with a lot of the students in the public schools are their families are from Puerto Rico, and there's a lot of going back and forth, and sometimes I wonder how much, if it does play a role at all in that, we decided to move back to Salinas or Guayama or wherever. Does that play a role, and if it does or it doesn't, what are some of the issues that seem to influence students not returning to school to finish out and graduate?
So we have increased our graduation rate. So I think when we talk about a big issue in Holyoke around attendance, we usually talk about chronic absenteeism. So chronic absenteeism is any student that is 10% or greater absent. So we have 180 school days. That would mean that a student missed 18 days. I
knew you would know that because you know your numbers. Thank you. Because I was thinking, okay, what's 10%? All right, thank you.
So 10% of 18 days would a student would be considered chronically absent, and we just know that a huge part of students feeling a sense of belonging, feeling confident in their learning, and getting better academic outcomes is being present in school. So I don't know what the root cause of the problem is, but I am 100% invested in trying to figure out what those root causes are and eliminating them. We had a focus group at the library, I want to say a few months ago, or a couple of months ago, to meet with a group of families that were selected by the family engagement coordinator as typically having kids that could potentially be chronically absent. And some of what I heard from the families is just health-related issues, right? One grandmother that I was speaking to, that she walks from Appleton Street to Worcester Place to pick up her grandkids and bring them to school. She mentioned that he does often get sick, and that when he is, absent, it's usually because he's sick. So, one of the things that we are trying to do a little bit differently this year is each of our family engagement team. So we now have a family engagement coordinator at every single one of our schools. And we have asked them to take on a caseload of 15 students that are, that are at risk of being chronically absent, and to really dig in and work with the family, connect with the family, and figure out what those reasons are and try to mitigate those. And we also have an attendance task force. We have members of the community. We meet down at Enlace on a monthly basis, and as part of that process, other school teams are able to collaborate with each other on their chronic absenteeism caseload, and they're able to learn from each other, and members of the community are in the room as well to see how can they help and support getting kids to want to come to school. Some of the feedback that we got last year was that our attendance campaign was really deficit-minded, or for example, the letters that we would send home if your child was 5 days absent, it sounded really threatening. So we did a lot of work in that group to really soften the language in a way where it feels more like a partnership. And we're really concerned with why your children are not coming to school and how can we support getting them there. And we rebranded the attendance campaign in that way too. We have a new attendance campaign, and it's really about being positive, not just saying, hey, you need to come to school, like if you don't, it's a bad thing, but like really talking about the positive things that could happen if you go to school. We know that students that have greater than 90% attendance are more likely to have better academic outcomes. They're more likely to be more confident in school. Imagine if you're missing a couple days a week and you get into class, your level of engagement is going to be different because you lost 2 days of instruction, right? And that's going to affect your confidence. That's going to affect your ability to learn or to get caught up. So that attendance is really important, and we want to understand why. What more could we do to get families to send their kids to school every day consistently?
Superintendent, tell me if this statement is correct. It seems like you and your administration have really shifted the focus into the community. Okay, what do you need? Rather than this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. That you're really creating in-depth partnerships with families. Is that true?
Yeah, I will say that there has been tremendous efforts to do that. I will say that it is the hardest. One of the things that I'll never forget that the mayor himself said is the hardest thing in government is engagement, and I can 100% wholeheartedly agree with that. I can honestly say that with every important decision that we have to make, there has never been any efforts to engage families in the conversation more so than we have done. So, we just recently went through a rezoning, my entry plan, our strategic planning process, all of that, every single time one of those really big decisions had to be made, the amount of effort put into really trying to engage families in the conversation, not just some families, but all families. We've done surveys, we've done meetings at different schools in different neighborhoods. We survey our families every year. So the effort is there. And I will say that, I'm proud of, in some of those big decisions, to be able to hear from over 1,400 people out of the amount of families that we have, or the amount of people that we have in this community is big, but it's not enough because there's still a lot of people that we're not hearing from. So I would say that that's been my approach, that's been my team's approach, that whenever we have to make an important decision, that we're doing everything we can to get input from the important stakeholders, from the people that are affected by those decisions. That might be families, that might be students, that might be staff members, but we are deeply committed to making sure before we make decisions that we're getting input.
And as the graduation rates have continued to rise, and congratulations for being a very important part of that story, mm-hmm. There still is those 20-something% students that don't. Mm-hmm. Going to the question of, is it just the profile of a community that is in transit ¿cómo es? Intransist a lot.
Transient, yeah.
Yeah, that is transient, that is here, but then now they're going to Springfield or they're going someplace else, maybe even back to Puerto Rico for some of them. And that's obviously out of the hands of the school department.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the families. But for the ones who do graduate, do you know, are they going to college, into the military, into the trades? Are they?
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
So we do have a significant amount of students that even get college credits before they graduate high school, which is amazing. You know, we have a dual language program. I believe we have a dual enrollment program. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I think we're scheduled to have about 141 students in the spring enrolled in the dual enrollment program, which is great. You know, I heard a story from one of our city councilors, actually, like that we don't promote that program as much. He had a daughter that just graduated last year and a son that graduated the year before. Mm-hmm. And his daughter that just graduated high school already had more college credits than his son who had done a whole year. So, you know, it's a blessing that we have these partnerships with Westfield State and Holyoke Community College where students do have the ability while they're in high school to take college courses that count towards their college degree. We have 3 different academies at the high school, and we have some vocational programming at Dean. Really proud of the turnaround at Dean. When I first got here, there was like 151 kids at Dean in total, and there wasn't a ton of structured learning or, you know, the vocational programming was really not there, and enrollment wasn't there. You know, it was a place, quite frankly, where kids were getting placed. It wasn't by choice. And, you know, we changed that. And now we have almost 400 kids at Dean. And we have a wait list. You know, unfortunately, there were over 100 kids that wanted to go to Dean. And we couldn't accommodate that. I'm hoping that in the future we can. You know, I'm a proud graduate of Dean. I was in the graphic arts shop. My dad still works at Marcus Printing here in Holyoke, and has been doing that forever. So I followed in his footsteps in that sense, but then ended up going to college, not continuing on with my trade. But I know how much a program like that means to this community, because quite frankly, college isn't for everybody. Like, some people don't want that, and that's okay. Our job in the school department is to make sure that our students are prepared when they graduate to do whatever it is that they want. If they want to go to college, they should be ready for college. If they want to get into a career, they should have developed the skills that it takes to be, you know, a productive member of anybody's team in the trade, in the career. If they want to go to the military, that they've acquired some skills during their tenure here in Holyoke Public Schools. That's really our goal, is when a student graduates, they are ready for life,
opportunities,
ready for career, ready for whatever it is that they want to do.
What kind of student were you in high school? How would you describe yourself? Looking back.
I was a very competitive student, so I was very much into sports. Actually, my basketball coach, my varsity basketball coach, is being inducted to the Athletic Hall of Fame this weekend.
Sweet.
So, Mr. McGrath, shout out to you. But I was very competitive, not just as an athlete, but as a student. So I, wanted to do well.
And to what do you attribute that to?
The chancleta was one of them. No. I think the competitiveness in me, like as a kid growing up in sports, wanting to do well, wanting to please my mom, wanting to please my teacher, wanting to just like not let people down. That approach really drove me. And I don't know. I don't know what I can attribute it to. I just really know I was competitive, which is why I love sports so much, because I feel I got a lot of that from sports. Like, I wanted to do better and be better, and I applied that in my learning. And I had a lot of people that cared. I often tell a story about one of my science teachers who, when I was in 8th grade at Peck, pulled me into the hallway. One time I went home and my mom was like, "Mira, Anthony, me llamó un tal Mr. Murphy ahí, yo no sé qué." And like what she had told me was that one of my teachers had called her and said, "Anthony's making the biggest mistake of his life. Ooh. And he's going to Dean, and you need to convince him to go to Holyoke High." And I said, "Mom, what did you tell him?" She said, "I told him you're a grown man and you could do whatever you want." Mm-hmm. And I was in 8th grade at that time. Like thinking back, my son's in 6th grade now. I don't think I would tell him he's a grown man and he can make his own decisions. Yeah. But one of the things that Mr. Murphy did the next day was he pulled me aside in the hallway and he said, "Anthony, I called your mom, I called your dad, and there was no way for me to convince them that you were making a mistake. So I better pick up the newspaper in 4 years and see that you're at the top of your class." And that did something to me. Like, I didn't understand why he even cared, but it really motivated me to, I wish, I did end up graduating, and 4 years later I was the salutatorian at Dean. I was in the newspaper, and I've always wanted to go back and show Mr. Murphy, like, "Hey, that push that you gave me, just knowing that you cared enough to call my mom was so important to me." Because I knew my mom cared, I knew my dad cared, but it was nice to know that somebody else believed in me, probably more than I believed in myself. To go above and beyond and make that phone call and even care about what decision I'm making, it just made me want to be like, okay, that's a challenge. I'm not going to let you down, and I'm going to do it. And those type of challenges, which is why I feel so deeply that we have to challenge our kids. One of the biggest problems that I've experienced in Holyoke in my tenure here is this pobrecito mentality.
Ay, sí, ay bendito. No
ay bendito, they can't learn. Ay bendito, they got it so hard. Like, yes, we have to have that level of empathy, but it's also important to have high standards and to, if a student is in 2nd grade, to really do everything you can to teach them at a 2nd grade level. It's okay to have empathy. It's okay to be understanding that our students come from all different backgrounds, but it's not okay to not hold them to high standards and to have high expectations for them, which can be challenging. It can be really challenging, but we have to get out of that cycle, and we have to believe that our kids can and will learn, and that's where it starts. Like, you have to have that belief as a teacher, as a leader, that our kids can do it, and we have to hold them to high standards. That's one of the things that motivated me, is that, having high standards for me and allowing me to get to them.
That is a great story, and teachers have so many challenges because, as you know, they're not just teaching, they're also, sometimes they're the mother and the father and the counselor and the coach, and they're all these roles in one. And how does the school department, and you talked about the joy for students, and how does the school department then, what kind of things are done to reaffirm to teachers, you are absolutely foundational in this school department, if you're a good teacher, and we want you to be happy here too.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to be honest. The pandemic has had an impact on a lot. And one of the things, there's one of the things that has happened in education in general is a staffing shortage. So I know, for whatever reason, people, it's not just in Holyoke, it's across the country. People are leaving education because it's gotten really hard since the pandemic. The amount of trauma that our students have experienced, that our staff have experienced, that our parents have experienced is like nothing we've ever seen before, right? And that causes stress on the teaching profession. And there are a lot of teachers in the world that have left the profession. But my sense, I know that there are a lot of people here in Holyoke that came to Holyoke because they want to be here in Holyoke. And we need to do everything that we can to keep those teachers. I know that in one of your questions, you were going to get to like, what are some of the challenges that we face and what needs to happen. One thing that needs to happen is we need to be able to retain our teachers. We did see a 6-point increase on our retention, but it's still not enough. It's right around 76% or 77% was how many teachers we retained.
But when you do that, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
One of the things that we need to do is retain them more from one year to the next. We're in the process of we have a teacher retention working group that we put together. And just like we did with rezoning and with our strategic plan and with the middle school, like we are going all out to talk to as many teachers as we can. We surveyed over 71% of all of our teachers and got that much of a response to really dig into like, what are the reasons that keep you here? What are the reasons that you've ever thought about leaving? I hope to have a plan in probably February that really has some recommendations for me on things that we can do to help keep teachers here in Holyoke. Some of the positive things that I heard, like from a lot of our teachers that said the reason they're here is they talked about the community. They love Holyoke, and Holyoke is where they want to teach. And I share that. Like, I love the fact that I'm working here in Holyoke. I did work in Springfield for like 9 years, and when the opportunity came up to come to Holyoke and to do the work that I love, I took it not because I wanted a different job, not because I wasn't happy, but because it was Holyoke. Holyoke is what drew me to coming into this role, and I know it does for a lot of people. Some of the things that I've heard is teachers feeling overwhelmed, teachers feeling like the workload is too much, and also teachers talking about some of the behaviors that are happening in our schools. And those are some things that we gotta look into. How could we make the workload a little better, and what could we do either to help support students that are having that need additional supports in terms of what's expected of them in a learning environment, and how to support teachers in dealing with students that may be experiencing that level of disengagement. So those are like two really big issues that we've heard. We're in the middle of the teacher retention working group. We've got more meetings to go, and part of the process is going to be, trying to get to root causes and trying to develop a plan on how do we tackle some of those issues. But that has an impact on. I think that's one of the most important things that we need to do. Is we spend a lot of time and energy on developing our teachers, but if we're doing that and they stay with us for 3 years, and all these other communities are scooping them up because they know how prepared they are and how good they are as teachers, then we're starting over constantly. And there's one of the most important things in the student outcomes and learning is the relationship between the teacher and the students. And
Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, Mr. Murphy. I knew Mr. Murphy when I was in 6th grade. I knew Mr. Murphy when I was in 7th grade, and I knew Mr. Murphy when I was in 8th grade. And that helped in terms of the student to teacher relationship. And like I said, we need to do a better job keeping our teachers there, because that's an important piece of continuing to build those relationships with students, which is going to unlock their potential to learning and all the things that we want them to do.
Thank you so much for, and I'm just going to have a couple of more questions if that's okay. Thank you very much for mentioning the pandemic. It was such a traumatic effect on a lot of people, but especially for the people in school, be they the students or the adults. And how do you catch up to losing all that time with your other companions, whether they're the other teachers or the other professionals in the building, everybody, from the person who teaches, the person who helps the teacher, the cafeteria people, the janitors, like how do you bring everybody back is this community healed, or it sounds like it's still not completely, and I'm not making a judgment on it. I think this is something that I've read about happening across the country, that schools haven't been able to get back into completely into their missions.
Yeah, I don't know that we've fully healed. I don't know that we'll ever really fully heal from the effects of that. But based on the accountability results that we just saw across the state, it appears that the slide is over, and there's finally a new baseline for all the things that the state measures, academic outcomes, attendance and that stuff, things like that. So since the pandemic, there was this slide, and it appears that this past year, that slide is has stabilized, but there's still a long way to go. When you look at academic outcomes and the state accountability system, the state as a whole, the state average as a whole, and Holyoke is not where we were pre-pandemic when you measure all those outcomes. But I feel like there's finally we finally stabilized to where we need to move up. We've spent a lot of time over the last 3 years developing our leaders. There's so much good work happening out in Holyoke Public Schools. And none of that work, it's so important to have really, really strong principals and leadership teams to support teachers in the important work that they need to do. And we've spent a lot of time making sure that our leaders are getting professional development on best instructional practices. Not just, oftentimes when you're a leader, I know you are putting out fires and you're dealing with so many different issues, and it's hard to keep your eyes on, instruction and on student outcomes. And we've made a significant investment to give our leaders the tools that they need so that there's common language across the district, strong instructional practices on how you're supporting teachers, how you're doing teacher observations, how you're coaching and lesson planning. One of the shifts that we have to make in this year is really reviewing student work. There's been a lot of inputs. I feel like we've done a lot to get inputs into strong teaching practices. And there hasn't been much focus on student product, student work. And we really need to start looking heavily at student work, which then is going to drive, how you lesson plan. Where are our students? What do they need? What does that mean for my teaching practice? What does that mean for my lesson planning? And what does that mean for next week? So, there's like I said, there's a lot that is happening. I want to, our principals have come a long way in that aspect. And we're trying very hard to make sure that we support them. We have amazing principals and I have an amazing team. And I'm just really proud of the work that they're doing. It's gonna outlive me, and we finally have really strong practices. Are they perfect? No, of course not. They're not perfect, but I know that our team and our leaders and our teachers are giving us with a lot of feedback on how we can make things better, and we're really reflective of that. And we're gonna continue to evolve, and we're gonna continue to adapt. But still know that students are at the center of all the decisions that we make, and students are why we exist, why we do what we do.
Is a final question. I did want to ask you who your favorite basketball team is, but
yeah,
who?
I'm a Boston fan, so
Celtics.
I like Celtics, Red Sox.
Yeah.
UMass is my favorite college
Patriots.
team. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. My grandfather.
Good luck with the Patriots.
My dad's a Yankees fan. I'm not proud of it, but my grandfather was the one that, when I would come home, he would actually, when he went to church, he used to record the games, the Red Sox games, on a VHS. And he didn't want to know who won because he was going to watch it when he got home from church.
And nobody told him.
So nobody told him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a big problem.
Yeah. The final question is, it sounds like the public education is evolving, not just in Holyoke, but across the country. Do you have ideas of what has been triggering that? Okay, we're not going to do what we've always done. You need to learn your arithmetic and whatever the other 2 A's were. I don't know if there are 2 A's or 3 A's. You know, you had to learn math and then English and something else. Do you know what may have been some of the triggers? Like, we have to be, like, as you've been doing more, we need to hear more from the people we are serving.
Yeah, I mean, I still think ELA is being taught, math is being taught, like, all of those things still need to happen. I think the shift that has happened is really becoming a community that embraces all of our students and understanding that our students have more needs and figuring out ways to, you know, that's the bar, right? Learning at grade level. Where there's been a shift is like, how do we get our kids there? What supports do they need? You know, we've invested a lot in additional counselors and academic interventionists and in coaching to help improve the quality of teaching, all in support of our students. The interesting thing is that a lot of the issues that the pandemic brought, I honestly, you know, it blows my mind that, you know, finally the world is paying attention. Like, and it's happening even now with the influx of migrants, and the state and the federal government is talking about it. But like, these are all challenges that Holyoke has been facing for many, 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 many years. So, you know, we've always had a significant population of families experiencing housing displacement. We've always had, you know, families that have, some of the things that the pandemic has brought on is like joblessness, you know, low engagement, social emotional learning, you know, trauma, like a lot of those things that are now people are paying attention about. We've had that in Holyoke for a while. So in many ways, we're a little bit ahead of the game in being able to manage them, but it's still greater than anything that we've seen. But I'm glad that now finally people are paying attention, and additional resources came to us through the form of ESSER, because they're recognizing that these are real challenges, and now they're not just happening in Holyoke, they're happening everywhere else too. So
yeah, you're right. It used to be like, public school, you know.
Yeah,
really
Holyoke, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
and now, you know, the pandemic has put a spotlight on important issues that we have to solve as a nation. And that, you know, and some of those issues have existed long before the pandemic in our community.
Superintendent, it's been a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.